What dangerous medical situation did your parents ignore because they were more worried about embarrassment? Your daughter will never play soccer again. The neurologist's words hung in the air like a death sentence while my parents sat in stunned silence. The brain damage from repeated untreated concussions is permanent. She's lucky to be alive. Dad's face went white as he realized his obsession with my soccer career had destroyed the very thing he'd sacrificed everything to build. 3 months earlier, I'd been the star midfielder everyone expected to earn a full ride to Stanford. Now I couldn't remember my own phone number or write a coherent sentence. The irony was perfect and devastating. The parents who'd pushed me so hard for academic and athletic success had stolen both my mind and my future. The first concussion happened during our regional championship against Westfield Academy. I was 15. Desperate to impress the college scouts Dad insisted were watching from the bleachers. He'd been obsessing over my recruitment for months, updating highlight reels, paying for expensive showcase tournaments, calling coaches daily with updates about my performance statistics. Their midfielder caught me with a vicious elbow to the temple as I went for a header. The impact sent me crashing to the turf, vision blurring, ears ringing like church bells. I lay there trying to focus on the concerned faces hovering over me while the world spun like a broken carnival ride. Coach Brennan knelt beside me, asking basic questions I struggled to answer. What's your name? What day is it? The words felt thick and clumsy in my mouth. Sophia. Thursday? But it was Saturday. The confusion terrified me, but not as much as seeing Dad's reaction in the stands. His jaw clenched with fury, arms crossed, like my injury was a personal insult to his master plan. The referee wanted to stop the game for a proper medical evaluation. Dad was already marching onto the field before the whistle finished blowing. He pushed past Coach Brennan and grabbed my arm, hauling me upright despite my protests about dizziness and nausea. She's fine, he announced loudly enough for the scouts to hear. Just got her bell rung. Standing made everything worse. The field tilted sideways, and I had to grip Dad's sleeve to keep from collapsing. Parents in the stands were recording with their phones, college recruiters scribbling notes about my toughness or weakness depending on what happened next. Dad's fingers dug into my shoulder as he whispered urgently, Stanford's coach is here. You cannot look fragile. Coach Brennan tried to intervene, clipboard in hand. Mr. Lawson, she needs immediate medical attention. Concussion protocol requires... Dad cut him off with a sharp gesture that brooked no argument. I know my daughter. She's been playing through bumps and bruises her whole life. This is what separates champions from quitters. The athletic trainer approached with her medical kit, but Dad blocked her path like a bouncer protecting a celebrity. We don't need that. Sophia, tell them you're ready to continue. His voice carried the threat I recognized from countless car rides home after disappointing performances. Disappointing Dad meant silent treatment, canceled weekend plans, lectures about wasted potential and family sacrifice. I nodded weakly, fighting waves of nausea that made speaking difficult. I'm okay, just a little dizzy. The lie tasted like copper pennies, but Dad's approval transformed him instantly from angry tyrant to proud father. He smiled and patted my back while the crowd applauded my warrior spirit and mental toughness. We won 3-1. I scored the final goal despite barely being able to track the ball's movement. In the parking lot afterward, 3 different coaches handed Dad their business cards while I vomited behind our minivan, chunks of my pregame meal splashing across the asphalt. Mom held my hair back and whispered apologies, but when Dad called for us to hurry, she immediately helped me into the passenger seat. The drive home was a blur of Dad's excited phone calls to relatives, describing my clutch performance under pressure, and refusal to let adversity break my focus. He transformed the injury into a recruiting advantage, spinning it as evidence of mental fortitude that college programs desperately needed. She took a hit that would have sidelined most players, then scored the game winner, he bragged to his brother. That night brought no sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, the room spun violently like being drunk without the euphoria. I kept forgetting basic information, where I'd left my phone, what assignments were due Monday, which friend had texted about weekend plans. When I finally admitted to Mom that something felt seriously wrong, she handed me 2 Tylenol and said we'd monitor how I felt tomorrow. Monday arrived with no improvement. Sitting in first period calculus, I stared at equations that might as well have been ancient hieroglyphics. The teacher's voice sounded muffled and distant, like I was trapped underwater. When she called on me to solve a problem I'd mastered months ago, I couldn't even remember what subject we were studying. My classmates turned to stare as I stammered nonsense about polynomials. My best friend Kaya noticed immediately during lunch. Soph, you look terrible. Are you still feeling effects from that hit Saturday? I wanted to tell her about the confusion, the constant headache, the way thoughts dissolved before I could capture them. Instead, I repeated Dad's approved response. Just tired from the big win. Nothing a good night's sleep won't fix. At soccer practice, simple drills felt impossibly complex. My coordination was completely off, timing wrong by fractions of seconds that made all the difference. Passes bounced off my feet instead of sticking to them like they had for years. I missed easy shots, lost track of play calls, and ran the wrong direction during scrimmage. The muscle memory I'd built over 10 years seemed erased overnight. Coach Brennan pulled me aside after I whiffed 3 consecutive passes to teammates standing 10 feet away. Sophia, are you still experiencing symptoms from Saturday's collision? The question hung in the air while I calculated the safest response. Dad would pick me up in an hour, and any report about ongoing health issues would trigger another lecture about mental toughness and championship mentality. No, I'm fine. Just having an off day. Coach Brennan's eyes narrowed with skepticism, studying my pale complexion and unsteady posture. He'd been coaching for 20 years and recognized the signs, but he nodded and sent me back to practice. I stumbled through the remaining drills, missing shots I could normally make blindfolded while teammates exchanged worried glances. That evening, Dad reviewed my practice performance on his phone app that tracked every sprint, pass, and touch during training sessions. His expression darkened as he scrolled through statistics that told a story of dramatic decline. Your speed is down 15% from last week. Passing accuracy dropped to 60%. Touch count is half your normal volume. What's happening to you? I sat at the kitchen table, struggling to form coherent thoughts while Mom prepared dinner with forced normalcy. Words I wanted to say kept slipping away, replaced by simpler ones that didn't capture my meaning. Just tired. Need more sleep, maybe. Big game took a lot out of me. Dad slammed the phone down so hard the salt shaker jumped, making me flinch involuntarily. Tired? Stanford doesn't recruit tired players, Sophia. Neither does Duke or North Carolina or any school worth attending. You think their athletes get tired after one little bump? His voice escalated with each word, attracting Mom's attention from the stove. I've sacrificed everything for your career. Your mother quit her job to drive you to tournaments. We're drowning in training expenses and showcase fees. The least you can do is play like you want this opportunity. Mom tried to intervene from the kitchen doorway, dish towel still in her hands, concern written across her face. David, maybe she needs a few days to recover from... He spun toward her, face flushed with fury that had been building all week. Recover from what? A routine collision that happens 50 times every game? This soft thinking is exactly what separates good players from great ones. Champions play through discomfort. The argument escalated until I couldn't tolerate the noise anymore, each raised voice sending spikes of pain through my skull. I retreated to my bedroom and lay in darkness, pressing pillows over my ears while the house seemed to sway beneath me. I had to grip the mattress with white knuckles to fight the sensation of falling through space towards some invisible ground. Over the following weeks, my symptoms worsened instead of improving like everyone expected. I forgot my locker combination repeatedly, had to ask teachers to repeat instructions 3 times, and lost track of conversations mid-sentence. My grades, always perfect A's that Dad used to brag about to other parents, began sliding toward C's and D's as I struggled with assignments I'd previously mastered. During chemistry class, I stared at formulas I'd memorized months earlier without recognizing them. When Mrs. Patterson called on me to balance an equation, I stood there mute while classmates whispered and giggled. The embarrassment burned worse than the constant headache, but I couldn't explain that my brain felt broken without admitting the injury Dad insisted didn't exist. My English teacher, Miss Rodriguez, kept me after class to discuss my recent essay about college goals. Sophia, this is completely unlike your usual work. The sentences don't connect logically, and you've repeated the same paragraph twice. She showed me the paper covered in red corrections, evidence of cognitive decline I couldn't hide anymore. I've been staying up late training, I lied, avoiding her concerned gaze. Soccer season is really demanding right now. Ms. Rodriguez nodded slowly, but made a note in her gradebook that would later become part of a pattern teachers began documenting. Something was seriously wrong with their formerly stellar student. Meanwhile, Dad doubled down on training intensity, convinced that harder work would restore whatever I'd lost. He scheduled additional private sessions with expensive coaches, increased my fitness regimen to twice daily, and started timing every sprint while measuring the velocity of every shot I took. When none of this improved my performance, his frustration boiled over into daily confrontations. "You're not trying hard enough," became his constant refrain during car rides that felt like therapy sessions from hell. Champions find ways to overcome obstacles. Winners push through pain and doubt to reach their potential. You're choosing to be a victim instead of a victor, and that choice will haunt you forever if you don't change. Each lecture deepened my confusion about what was real and what was failure of character. Maybe Dad was right that I'd become weak and unfocused. Maybe the injury was just an excuse for losing my competitive edge. The self-doubt felt worse than the physical symptoms, eating away at my identity as someone who'd always been mentally tough. Dr. Williams, our family physician who'd treated me for minor sports injuries since I was 10, finally got to examine me when Mom scheduled an appointment without telling Dad. I hoped for answers that would make sense of the chaos in my head, but the visit was rushed and focused on obvious physical problems rather than subtle neurological changes. "Some dizziness and fatigue after a collision is normal for young athletes," Dr. Williams said after a brief examination that lasted maybe 5 minutes. "Your reflexes look fine, and there's no obvious swelling or bruising. Make sure you're getting adequate sleep and proper nutrition. Follow up if symptoms persist beyond another month." He prescribed rest that Dad would never allow and suggested reducing physical activity that would trigger another family war. In the car afterward, Mom made me promise not to tell Dad about the visit. "He's under tremendous stress about your recruitment timeline," she explained. "Let's see if the doctor's advice helps before we create more problems at home." Her willingness to hide my medical care felt like another betrayal of my health, but I understood her position. Dad's moods had become increasingly volatile as my performance declined, and any evidence of medical excuses would unleash his fury on both of us. Mom walked on eggshells, trying to keep peace while watching her daughter deteriorate. The symptoms didn't improve with rest I wasn't getting, and nutrition that couldn't heal damaged brain tissue. My personality began changing in ways that scared everyone around me, including myself. Previously calm and focused, I became irritable and impulsive, snapping at teachers and teammates over minor issues that wouldn't have bothered me before. Kaya tried to stage an intervention after I screamed at her for asking about homework assignments I'd forgotten again. "Soph, this isn't you," she said carefully, tears in her eyes. "You've been different since that hit against Westfield. Maybe you should see someone who specializes in head injuries. My cousin had similar problems after her car accident." But acknowledging brain damage meant admitting weakness Dad would never forgive, and potentially ending the soccer career that defined our family's entire identity. I was trapped between my body's distress signals and my father's relentless pressure to perform at levels that were no longer possible. The second major hit came during practice 3 weeks later. I was challenging for a header during scrimmage when our center back mistimed her jump, driving her elbow into my already damaged skull. The impact sent me crashing to the ground again, vision fragmenting like a broken kaleidoscope while teammates shouted for Coach Brennan. This time, the symptoms were immediate and undeniable. I couldn't remember my own name for several minutes, threw up repeatedly, and couldn't walk without assistance. Coach Brennan insisted on calling an ambulance, but Dad arrived before the paramedics and again took control of the situation with his usual authority and denial. "She's just shaken up," he told the emergency responders who wanted to transport me to the hospital. "These girls are tough. She'll be fine with some rest at home." The paramedics explained concussion protocols and the dangers of refusing medical evaluation, but Dad signed the liability waiver and loaded me into our car against their recommendations. The drive home was a nightmare of nausea and confusion, while Dad lectured about the importance of showing mental resilience. "College scouts don't want players who can't handle physical play," he said while I held a bag to my mouth. "This is exactly the kind of adversity that makes champions stronger. You'll thank me later for teaching you to push through challenges." At home, I spent the next 3 days in bed, unable to keep food down or tolerate normal light levels. Mom brought me meals I couldn't eat, and ice packs that provided minimal relief for the constant headache that felt like someone hammering nails into my skull. She kept checking on me every hour, clearly worried but afraid to contradict Dad's orders to let me recover naturally. When I finally returned to school, the academic disaster was complete. I couldn't follow lectures, lost track of assignments, and failed tests in subjects where I'd previously excelled. My guidance counselor, Mr. Phillips, called me into his office to discuss my college applications with growing concern about my dramatic decline. "Sophia, your grades have dropped significantly this semester, and teachers report that you seem confused and disoriented in class," he said, reviewing my transcript with visible worry. "Your SAT scores from last spring were excellent, but if this trend continues, you might need to reconsider your target schools or delay applications until you resolve whatever is affecting your performance." I sat in his office, unable to articulate that the person who'd taken those SAT scores felt like a stranger now. The academic achievements that had once come naturally were beyond my reach, but I couldn't explain why without admitting the injury Dad insisted was just an excuse for laziness and lack of commitment. Meanwhile, Dad arranged even more intensive training with college recruiting specialists who charged hundreds of dollars per session. "We need to get your performance back on track before the showcase tournament next month," he announced over dinner. 3 Division I coaches will be there specifically to watch you play. This is your last chance to prove you belong at the highest level. The thought of facing more scrutiny from college scouts made my damaged brain pound with anxiety, but refusing wasn't an option in our household. Dad had already paid the entry fees, booked hotel rooms, and taken time off work. Our family's financial future depended on my ability to perform at levels my injury had made impossible. The private training sessions became torture, as Coach Williams pushed me through drills at maximum intensity, while Dad filmed everything for later analysis. My coordination remained terrible, and simple touches felt impossibly difficult. After each session, I was stumbling and disoriented, but the coaches interpreted this as lack of fitness, rather than neurological damage. "She's lost her competitive edge," Coach Williams told Dad while I sat on the sideline trying not to vomit. "Needs more conditioning work and mental toughness training. Too many young players get soft when they think success is guaranteed. She needs to remember what hunger feels like." Dad nodded grimly, already planning additional workouts that would further damage my healing brain. At school, my decline became impossible to hide from teachers who'd known me for years. Mrs. Jang, my AP English teacher, kept me after class multiple times to discuss essays that had become incoherent rambling completely unlike my previous work. She asked about personal problems, family stress, or substance abuse issues that might explain my transformation from honor student to struggling learner. But I wanted to tell her everything about the confusion, the memory problems, the way reading had become laboriously slow, and writing felt like translating from a foreign language. But Dad's voice echoed constantly. "Never let teachers think you can't handle pressure. Colleges want students who overcome challenges, not ones who make excuses for poor performance." The showcase tournament arrived with perfect October weather, and over 50 college recruiters spread across multiple fields. Dad had been building toward this weekend for months, treating it like our family's Super Bowl with hotel reservations, new equipment, and a detailed schedule of which coaches to target for conversations. In our hotel room the night before the first game, Dad spread recruiting brochures across both beds like a general planning military strategy. Stanford, Duke, North Carolina, UCLA. "Tomorrow changes everything," he said, eyes bright with anticipation despite my obvious struggles. "Play like the Sophia I know you are, and you'll have your pick of schools. Play like you have been lately, and we're looking at community college." I stared at the brochures through a haze of exhaustion and confusion, words blurring together until they became meaningless shapes. When Dad asked me to rank my preferences and explain why each program appealed to me, I pointed randomly while mumbling generic responses about good academics and strong soccer tradition. Game day brought crisp morning air and crowds of parents clutching coffee cups and clipboards full of recruiting information. The college coaches set up their folding chairs along the sideline with notepads ready, stopwatches around their necks, professional cameras with telephoto lenses to capture every movement and decision. Dad positioned himself directly behind the coaches, close enough to overhear their comments about players they were evaluating. He wore his Stanford alumni shirt and carried a folder of my highlight videos, ready to approach any coach who showed interest in discussing my potential fit for their program. During warm-ups, I felt completely disconnected from my body, like watching someone else control my movements through a fog of neurological damage. Simple juggling drills that had been automatic since age 10 now required intense concentration that left me exhausted before the game even started. Kaya jogged over with concern written across her face as I struggled with basic ball control. "Soph, you look really pale and shaky. Are you sure you're okay to play today?" Before I could answer honestly, Coach Brennan called us into a huddle for final tactical instructions and motivational speech. The Stanford coach was watching intently from her prime sideline position, pen poised over her notepad, while an assistant filmed our warm-up routine. Everything hinged on the next 90 minutes, and I felt completely unprepared for the pressure of performing with a brain that no longer functioned properly. The opening whistle blew, and chaos erupted around me at a speed my damaged mind couldn't process. Players moved faster than I could track, passes came before I could react, and within minutes I was completely lost on a field where I'd once dominated. What should have been instinctive decisions became impossible calculations that took too long to solve. 10 minutes into the game, their forward easily stole the ball from my feet and scored while I stood frozen, unable to determine which direction to defend or how to position my body. The college coaches scribbled notes while Dad's face turned red with embarrassment visible from across the field. "Come on, Sophia," he shouted. "Play like you know how to play." But I didn't know how anymore. The skills I'd built over 10 years of dedicated training felt locked away behind a fog I couldn't clear no matter how hard I concentrated. Every touch was heavy, every decision wrong, every movement a beat behind where it should be. My teammates grew frustrated as passes bounced off my feet and scoring opportunities vanished through my mistakes. At halftime, we were down 3-0, and I was directly responsible for at least 2 of their goals through basic errors that would have been unthinkable months earlier. In the huddle, Coach Brennan spoke carefully about adjusting our formation, but I could see the disappointment and confusion in his eyes. This wasn't the player he'd coached for 3 years. The college coaches had stopped taking notes about me specifically, their attention shifting to other players who were actually performing at the level required for Division I recruitment. The Stanford coach packed up her materials and moved to a different field where more promising prospects were playing. Dad intercepted me on the way back to the field for the second half, gripping my shoulders hard enough to leave bruises while other parents pretended not to notice. "What is wrong with you?" he hissed through clenched teeth. "This is not the player I've been developing for 15 years. You're embarrassing yourself, your team, and our entire family." The second half was even worse as my confusion deepened with physical exhaustion. I began making errors so basic that parents in the stands started commenting audibly about my decline. "Number 12 used to be so dominant," I heard someone say. "Wonder what happened to her confidence. Looks like she's forgotten how to play." The shame burned worse than any physical pain while I continued stumbling around the field like a stranger wearing someone else's jersey. With 15 minutes remaining, their midfielder sent a routine cross that I should have easily cleared. Instead, I misjudged the ball completely, swinging at empty air while it sailed past me for another goal that sealed our humiliating defeat. After the final whistle of our 5-1 loss, Dad didn't speak to me during the entire drive home. Mom sat in the passenger seat dabbing at her eyes with tissues, mourning the scholarship money that had just evaporated along with years of family sacrifice and planning. In the back seat, I pressed my face against the cool window and tried to remember why any of this had ever mattered. That night, I attempted to complete homework assignments that might as well have been written in ancient languages I'd never studied. Mathematical concepts I'd mastered months earlier looked completely foreign. Essays I tried to write came out as disconnected fragments that made no sense when I read them back, evidence of cognitive damage that couldn't be hidden much longer. Mom found me crying at my desk at 2 a.m, surrounded by crumpled papers and deleted documents representing hours of futile effort. "Honey, what's wrong?" she asked. But I couldn't explain that my mind felt broken, that thoughts slipped away before I could capture them, that the future we'd all planned was disappearing piece by piece. The next few weeks brought a cascade of academic and athletic disasters that finally forced Mom to acknowledge what Dad refused to see. Failed tests in classes where I'd always excelled. Assignments turned in late or incomplete because I couldn't remember due dates or understand basic instructions. Soccer practices where I looked lost and confused, unable to execute plays I'd run thousands of times. During a particularly bad practice where I scored on our own goal and couldn't remember which direction we were attacking, Coach Brennan finally called my parents for a meeting. He'd been coaching high school soccer for 25 years and had seen enough head injuries to recognize the signs everyone was ignoring. "I'm concerned about Sophia's cognitive state," he told my parents in his small office after practice. "She's showing classic symptoms of unresolved concussion issues. Memory problems, confusion, coordination difficulties. She needs to see a neurologist immediately, and she cannot continue playing until she's medically cleared." Dad's reaction was explosive and predictable. "Are you suggesting my daughter is brain damaged? She's just going through a rough patch that every athlete faces. Maybe your coaching isn't challenging her appropriately. Maybe she needs to be pushed harder, not coddled with medical excuses." Coach Brennan stood his ground despite Dad's intimidation tactics. "Mr. Lawson, I've coached over 1,000 players, and I know when someone is struggling with head trauma. Sophia needs professional medical evaluation, not more training. I won't allow her to practice or play until she's examined by a qualified physician." The meeting ended with Dad storming out, threatening to transfer me to a different school with coaches who understand what it takes to win championships. But Coach Brennan's ultimatum finally gave Mom the ammunition she needed to demand proper medical care, regardless of Dad's objections and fears about damaging my recruitment prospects. The appointment with Dr. Rebecca Chen, a neurologist specializing in sports-related brain injuries, was scheduled for the following week. Mom made it clear to Dad that this wasn't negotiable anymore. Not after a teacher had called expressing concerns about my dramatic cognitive decline and inability to complete basic assignments. Dr. Chen's examination was thorough and terrifying, revealing the extent of damage that months of denial had allowed to accumulate. The MRI showed clear evidence of multiple concussions with scarring in areas responsible for memory, concentration, and executive function. Blood tests revealed elevated proteins that indicated ongoing brain inflammation. "Sophia has suffered at least 2 significant concussions, possibly more," Dr. Chen explained. while showing us the brain scans that looked like maps of a war zone. The damage is substantial, and in some cases permanent. Continuing to play soccer or engage in any contact activities could result in catastrophic injury or death. The silence in the examination room stretched for endless minutes, while Dad processed information that shattered his entire worldview. The daughter he'd pushed so hard to achieve athletic excellence would never play competitive sports again. The scholarship dreams that had driven our family's decisions for years were officially dead. "But she can recover, right?" Mom asked through tears. "With rest and therapy, she can get back to normal?" Dr. Chen's expression remained professionally sympathetic but realistic. "Some functions may improve with time and treatment, but the scarring in her frontal lobe will cause permanent deficits. Her academic abilities, memory formation, and personality may be affected for life." Dad finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "How bad is the permanent damage? What does this mean for her college prospects?" The question revealed that even facing neurological devastation, he was still thinking primarily about achievements and opportunities rather than his daughter's basic health and well-being. Dr. Chen pulled no punches in her response. "Mr. Lawson, your daughter's brain has been severely damaged by repeated untreated concussions. Instead of worrying about college, you should be grateful she's alive. Many athletes with similar injuries don't survive, and those who do often face decades of cognitive and emotional struggles." Over the following months, the full scope of my disabilities became clear through extensive neuropsychological testing. My IQ had dropped 15 points. My processing speed was slower than average. Short-term memory formation was severely impaired. The honor student who'd been destined for academic scholarships now struggled with basic reading comprehension. The irony was cruel and complete. Parents who'd pushed me relentlessly toward educational and athletic success had stolen my ability to excel at either. The brain damage that ended my soccer career also destroyed my capacity for the academic achievement they'd always demanded as backup to athletic glory. Physical therapy helped with balance and coordination issues, but occupational therapy revealed the extent of cognitive deficits that would affect every aspect of my future life. Simple tasks like following multi-step instructions or organizing information became exhausting challenges requiring enormous effort and frequent breaks. Dad struggled to accept the new reality, cycling through denial, anger, and bargaining phases that made family life even more difficult. He researched experimental treatments, contacted specialists across the country, and spent thousands of dollars on supplements and therapies that promised miraculous recovery but delivered only false hope. Mom filed for divorce 6 months after my diagnosis, unable to continue living with someone who'd prioritized athletic achievement over his daughter's basic safety. In court documents, she detailed years of pressure that had culminated in life-altering brain damage that could have been prevented with appropriate medical care after my first concussion. The custody hearing was devastating for Dad, who had to listen while medical experts testified about the permanent cognitive disabilities his obsession with soccer success had caused. The judge was particularly harsh in her comments about parents who value trophies more than children's well-being. I started my senior year at a new school with accommodations for learning disabilities that would have been unthinkable before my injuries. Extended time for tests, note-taking assistance, reduced course loads. The college applications I'd once dreamed about were replaced by research into vocational programs designed for people with traumatic brain injuries. Coach Brennan visited me several months after the diagnosis, bringing photos from the team's successful season and updates about former teammates who were receiving scholarship offers. He apologized for not acting sooner when he recognized the signs of my deteriorating condition, explaining how parental pressure sometimes made coaches hesitate to override family decisions. "I should have insisted on medical evaluation after your first concussion," he said, clearly carrying guilt about his role in the tragedy. "I knew something was wrong, but your father was so convinced you were fine that I doubted my instincts. I'll never make that mistake again with any player." The legal settlement with the school district included policy changes requiring mandatory removal of any player showing concussion symptoms, regardless of parental objections. Coach Brennan became an advocate for player safety, speaking at conferences about the dangers of letting competitive pressure override medical protocols. 2 years later, I work part-time at a veterinary clinic, a job that accommodates my cognitive limitations while providing purpose and satisfaction. The career I'd once imagined in medicine or law is impossible now, but I've found meaning in helping animals and supporting pet owners through difficult times. Dad still struggles with guilt about his role in destroying the future he'd worked so hard to create. We have a limited relationship now, complicated by my ongoing resentment and his difficulty accepting responsibility for decisions that changed everything. He attends family therapy sessions but has trouble moving beyond self-pity to genuine accountability. The brain damage is permanent, just as Dr. Chen warned. I take medication for seizures, see specialists regularly, and live with constant reminders of cognitive abilities I'll never recover. But I'm alive, which wasn't guaranteed during those months when repeated concussions were accumulating untreated damage. Sometimes I wonder who I might have become without the injuries, what colleges I might have attended, what career I might have chosen if my brain had remained intact. The life I'm living now is smaller and more limited than anyone expected, but it's mine, and I've learned to find joy in possibilities that remain, rather than mourning everything that was lost.